Hey guys, Trainer DC here, coming at you with another video. Now that we're a little bit less than a month away from Pokemon Day, I thought it would be a good time to go over everything we know about Pokemon Wind and Waves Generation 10, which we are expecting to get revealed on February 27th of this year, which is of course Pokemon Day. So without further ado, let's get into this. This information is all coming from Pokeos.com, so shout out to them. They've done such a fantastic job of compiling all the leaks together. The first piece of information that we have is the release of the game, right? Pokemon Wind and Waves is going to come out this fall, being 2026, and we are expecting to get DLC for the game at some point next year. As for the title of the games, it's Pokemon Wind and Waves or some semblance of that. Right now, we don't know. It might be Pokemon Wind and Pokemon Waves singular. It might be Pokemon Wind singular plural waves, or Pokemon Winds and Waves both plural. We really don't know, but it's some semblance of that name, which again, we know a lot of information about this game before it's even been announced yet, which is absolutely insane. As for the titles itself, we have some pitch materials here that highlight how this game's about a world designed to expand endlessly, a strong emphasis on the weather systems, wind, sea, and natural phenomenons, which that's going to come into play a little bit later when we get to the gimmick. Exploration-driven gameplay across multiple islands and open environments. If you guys don't know, we'll get to the map in a little bit, but this game is going to be an island hopping adventure, so very different from any other Pokemon that we've gotten before, and it's structured apparently closer to an open world MMO rather than your traditional linear routes that you would see in older Pokemon. But I would argue that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are also kind of, made that way. There's not really traditional routes or cities and towns in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Like, yes, you have cities, but you don't have traditional routes. There's just different provinces and different wild areas and wild zones within them, and it's obviously one big open world map. There's an image here of Nemona from Scarlet and Violet and what the concept art is for this region. I doubt the game's gonna look like this. It's gonna look good visually because we do have internal test videos, which I will not show here, but the internal test videos look really good from what we've seen thus far, but I wouldn't expect it to look this good. This is kind of just their internal pitch documents for what they want the region to look like. It's gonna be a much more wilderness-like region, we can presume, from the different islands. I'm sure you'll have islands that are more city-like, you'll have islands that are more jungle-like, you'll probably have islands that are more frigid and, cold themed. We'll see more of that later in this video, but just those are things to keep in mind. As for the region itself, we don't have a name for the region, but it's going to take place in Southeast Asia, which contradicts the earlier report that we had that it was going to be a Greek-based region. I think Southeast Asia is a good location to base a Pokemon game on. However, I am very disappointed that it's not going to be a Greek-based region, because I've been saying for the past 12 to 13 years that I want a Greece-based Pokemon region. Greece is my #1 region I want to see made into a Pokemon region, because I think just the lore of Greek itself and just Greek mythology would be amazing to have in Pokemon. I've said this on other videos before, but you have a legendary for each of the Greek gods. That would be absolutely sick to do, but unfortunately that's not what we're getting here. We're getting Southeast Asia. As I said before, it's going to be made up of a bunch of different islands, apparently 54 islands to be exact, which sounds rather large. And I will say about this, the thing about this is all probably from earlier builds of the game, like very early on. So stuff might get scrapped from this. Don't expect everything you see here to be one-to-one represented in the final product. Like if you remember from the Sword and Shield beta that leaked, there were Mega Evolutions in the beta. There was a Mega Rayquaza there. We did not have Mega Evolutions in Sword and Shield. In the Sword and Shield beta, they were going to have cutscenes of Gigantamax Pokemon going berserk throughout the region. That was not in the final version of the game. So again, take everything with a grain of salt, because this is what they're planning to do, but some things might be too ambitious, as they'll discover during development. This is the map though that we have here. Again, doesn't look like there are 54 islands here, so I'm kind of wondering how large some of these islands actually are, because obviously if you look at the map here, like the island in the middle is rather large, the island to the top right is rather large, the bottom left, the top left, those are large islands, and obviously there are smaller islands sparse throughout it. So again, I would take the 54 island number with a grain of salt. I'm sure it's going to be less than that. The next section here goes over the gimmick, which I have a full video going over the gimmick, which I'll leave a card up above to it. But basically this gimmick is involving Majin, which are supposedly going to be these deity-like Pokemon, these god-like creatures that basically guard over each of the islands. I guess each of the major islands, because there's not going to be 54 of them. We actually have a listing of what typings will get Majin later on in this article. But the gimmick basically supposedly is going to have to do with weather-based moves or effects. It's very unclear exactly how this is going to work, but there is a GIF here of a Pikachu undergoing what is supposed to be this Majin effect on it. We discussed this at length again in that other video. If you want to watch it, check it out. But Majin are going to be Pokemon from another dimension, very similar sounding to Ultra Beasts, basically these Pokemon that come from another universe, another world that somehow made their way into our universe. There's a lot of similarities here to me between Gen 7 and Gen 10. Just the Majin versus Ultra Beast, very similar. The whole Seed Pokemon versus Nebby, Cosmog, very similar. Who knows exactly what this all is? I'm not going to speculate on that here because there's a lot else for us to go over, and I did that in the other video. Apparently in this game, we're going to traverse using the Rotom scooter, which you can see here. Apparently how this is going to work is essentially a Pokemon is going to be riding in front of us, as you can see in this image here. And basically we're going to have like a rope or some sort of harness tied around the Pokemon, and it's going to work with every Pokemon in the game. And they're basically going to pull us around the region. Fine, I'm not really too intrigued by how we're going to traverse the region. I don't really care all that much about that. I think this is a fine idea, and we'll see how it looks in the final game. The article from Pokeos goes very much so in depth on the development timeline for this game. Apparently, the initial ideas for Project Gaia, which again is Wind and Wave Gen 10, came about in May of 2021. I'm not going to go over all of this exactly because this information is really not all that relevant as to what's happening right now with the game and what we know about it, but those are just things to keep in mind. If you want to go through the article yourself, you can read those at length. But we have the core theme for Gaia, which is an endless story, aka infinity. This is something that I remember reading a few months ago when we went over those central leaks in that video. Again, card above if you want to see that. But the story is framed as being an endless cycle that began long ago and will continue far into the future. Past generations entrust something to the present. The present lives by what it has inherited, and in turn must decide what to pass on to the next generation. Wind and Wave are described as invisible forces that move people forward, shaping nature, Pokemon, and history itself. So this game is going to be very much so based on tradition, and basically what do you pass on to the next generation, what traditions should be carried forward, and what traditions should maybe be lost to time. It goes on to say how the world is not perfect, it's not worthy of being passed to our children in certain aspects, so survival is presented not just as a gameplay concept, but as a message of prepare the next generation to endure a harsh and unstable world. So it seems like it's going to have some deeper themes, and again, these are just initial ideas, so we'll see how that all comes about. We have some descriptions here of the characters. Apparently the protagonist of this game is a 13-year-old child living in a large metropolis city inspired by Kuala Lumpur. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the story deliberately avoids the traditional rural starting point, opting instead to begin in a modern city to create contrast. I love this idea. I love the fact that we're mixing up the formula. Instead of starting from outside of the main cities within the region, we are starting within one of the main cities, and we're going to have to traverse the region that way. I remember reading before that apparently we're traveling with our mother and we're on vacation, and that our story basically starts from a bunch of Pokemon getting loose in this city we're staying in, and we have to help capture some of the Pokemon which end up being our starter Pokemon. As for the rest of the characters, as I said, the protagonist is 13 years old, the mother is 33, a work from home parent raising 2 children in the city. She takes a long vacation after winning the lottery, hoping to relax and reconnect with her family. You have an infant sibling who is a baby, age 0, it says here. They cannot talk at the beginning of the game, but by the story's end, the baby learns to talk and walk. So I'm assuming and hoping, and this is something that's been rumored, but I'm hoping this game has voice acting because Pokemon has desperately needed voice acting since Sword and Shield. I remember when I started playing Sword, when it came out, I got the game a little bit early, and I remember just seeing that opening sequence with Chairman Rose and just thinking to myself, this desperately needs voice acting because it just seems like it's something missing at this point. In Scarlet and Violet, I felt that even further, and even more so in Pokemon Legends ZA. So our friend and rival is also 13. It's a local child who lives on the resort island that the player visits. It acts as our friend and rival. Just think about your typical Pokemon rival as of late. It's not going to be something crazy, but think of Hop and Nimona and those types of characters we've been getting lately. We have the hotel chairman, age 75, the heir to the hotel chairman, age 15. Yeah, that's a big age gap. It says the chairman's younger son or adopted child who serves in a leadership role within the organization. Naive but well-intentioned, he respects his father deeply efficiently while struggling to understand the world's complexities. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the chairman of the hotel and his son end up being some sort of evil team, because they discuss how for the hotel chairman, after a tragic incident involving his family, his ideals shifted towards aggressive land development and resentment towards Pokemon. Those sound like evil team motivations to me, and given that part of the plot or their lore here, that character lore, I'm assuming that this heir is their adopted child, because maybe after losing his entire family, he takes this kid in off the streets and basically makes him their son and adopted child to replace the family that he lost. The land development team is the evil team. It's a construction group hired to expand land for profit. Again, sounds like this is tied to the chairman, given that the chairman is looking for land development and has aggressive resentment towards Pokemon. Unlike the previous villainous teams, they lack strong ideals. They simply do their job for money, often complaining about their work. I really wonder who's hiring these people. Again, it seems like it's probably the hotel chairman. The professor is 21 years old, known as the survival professor. This young researcher works as a nature guide at the hotel. He studies the relationship between weather patterns and Pokemon capable of embodying the forces of nature, which again is going to have to do with this gimmick. Although academically talented, his real-world survival skills are surprisingly limited compared to those of his more experienced colleagues. There's actually an image here of what the professor looks like. Supposedly, a lot of people are saying that this professor is going to be based on Charles Darwin, who obviously is someone who is a major player, a major scientist in the theory of evolution. And I believe there's actually an island within Southeast Asia that is named after Charles Darwin, the Darwin Islands. So it'd be rather fitting for him to be the professor of this region. We go on to the seed Pokemon, which I'm going to paraphrase all this because I know a good amount about this. Basically, the seed Pokemon is going to be this Pokemon that we get at the beginning of our adventure, and essentially it's going to have a procedurally generated form or evolution, meaning that every person's evolution for this Pokemon or form change for this Pokemon is going to be distinctively unique to their save file, and no one will have the two same versions of this Pokemon. Think of Spinda from back in the day, how every Spinda has different spinning patterns. This is basically what's going to happen with this Pokemon. Apparently it's going to be tied into the Storm and Wave legendary, the Wind and Wave legendary, and we're going to get this Pokemon very early on in the resort area. To me, this very much so sounds like it's going to be kind of like Cosmog in Sun and Moon, how we get Cosmog at the very beginning of the game and eventually learn that it evolves into Cosmoem and eventually Solgaleo and Lunala respectively. I think it's going to be something very similar here, except instead of evolving into the legendaries themselves, this Pokemon's going to evolve or change form into something new. The reason I say I think it's going to change form and not evolve is because I don't think this Pokemon's going to have a procedurally generated form that is an evolution, because when you transfer that to another game or when you transfer it to Pokemon Home, it's not going to keep that form, because they said every single version of the game is going to have a different form of the Pokemon. So in theory, I guess technically you could catch like a Spinda and it stays that one Spinda regardless of what game you take it to. So maybe it does do that, but again, that remains to be seen. Supposedly as well, it says here that the seed Pokemon is not just a creature but a system. Its growth directly affects the world itself, procedurally shaping islands, environments, and ecosystem. It also functions as a progression gate, unlocking access to key areas, including the legendary islands. I don't know how much of this is really going to make its way into the game, because again, this all sounds rather ambitious, and I feel like Game Freak often does have rather ambitious ideas that don't make it into the final game just because of development constraints, because these games do come out rather quickly and don't have the longest development timeline. Like that new game they're working on Xbox and PlayStation, I think had a 6-year development timeline, whereas this has what, a 4-ish year development timeline, maybe 5 years if the conceptualization started in 2021. But when did the actual development start, the coding and whatnot? As for the legendaries themselves, we have the Wind and the Wave legendary, both of which are described as being elder guardians residing on an island, one of which is a storm-covered island, one of which is surrounded by powerful seas. It guides humans through the Wind and Wave respectively to get to the island only if they've properly raised the seed Pokemon. So again, tied into this legendary like Pokemon that's going to be procedurally generated based on our journey within the game. It says these legendaries are not portrayed as traditional villains or mandatory bosses. Instead, they act more as moral and narrative gatekeepers, embodying the invisible forces that connect humans, Pokemon, and nature. Also to note, you don't have to capture them to beat the game, but it says in order to get the true ending of the game, you need to capture them. Supposedly this game is going to be a lot less linear than our traditional Pokemon games. We could do anything we want in any order, and supposedly we can even go to the final boss right at the beginning of the game, and in theory you could beat it if you could take it down, which I think is cool. I mean, I'm someone who does play the linear aspect of it, so I'm not, I don't really care so much about doing stuff in a certain order or whatever order I want. I just want to play the game. It doesn't really bother me if it is linear or not linear, but I know a lot of people have been wanting a not linear structure for Pokemon. I'm going to jump ahead on Pokeos because a lot of this information is rather repetitive, but the interesting thing about this is we have the Majin assets. These are, again, the legendary like Pokemon that are going to be the guardians for each island. Within the code of the game, we have Majin Esper, which will be our psychic type Majin. We have a ghost, fire, rock, ground, and ice types. So again, this could all change because this is all earlier on within development, and maybe they change the typings around or add new ones, but this is the ideas of the different typings for the different Majins, and there's a total of 7 of them, so I'm not exactly sure how that's going to all work, given that they're supposed to be guarding over each of the islands. Maybe it's just the larger islands that have one. Maybe there end up being more. Maybe there end up being less of them. Who knows? As for the Titan or bosses we're going to have in the game, the typings that we have here are electric, dragon, ghost, ground, water, bug, and apparently there's data remaining from Scarlet and Violet for steel, flying, and rock. For the gym leaders, we have dark, poison, fairy, steel, flying, and fighting, which make up 7 gyms. So the last 2 that are in the code are bug and electric. Presumably one of them will be exclusive to Pokemon Wind and one of them will be exclusive to Pokemon Waves, like we've seen in past games before. Structurally speaking, the game is going to have 8 gyms, 5 Titan-like Pokemon, and then you'll have, I guess, something else for your Team Star bosses, how we had in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. They want to keep it so that all 18 types are represented in some aspect of the story in terms of boss fights. So all of these gym leaders and all of these Titans, these boss fights, are all going to make up the 18 typings that we have within Pokemon. This is something very similar to what they did in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, how we have each typing represented in some sort of boss fight. And in addition to that, apparently each of these boss fights or gym leaders or whatever the case may be for each typing, they're going to be tied to different sustainability goals. So that's something to keep in mind. This game is very much so based on nature. Again, another similarity to Gen 7, the Alola region. There's really a lot of similarities here to Gen 7. The whole nature theme, the whole Pokemon from another dimension, the whole fact that we might be getting weather moves in the gimmick, which weather moves are kind of like Z moves, right? An ultra powerful move, although again, the gimmick is kind of murky as to what exactly it's going to be. We know that apparently Majin are going to have to do with it, and maybe these Majin are going to possess some of these Pokemon. There's been rumors about that, and rumors about even potential form changes, but again, I don't want to get into that too in depth in this video. There's a whole video going over that on the channel, but the similarities to Gen 7 are kind of endless. Again, Gen 7 Alola is an island-based region, not exactly island hopping, as we can only traverse, the 4 islands themselves and not exactly the water routes. But again, so many similarities between Generation 7 and Generation 10. It's kind of crazy. As for the biomes of the game, apparently we're going to have 5 different deserts, 2 grasslands, 2 snowfields, and 2 volcanoes and wetlands respectively. So it just shows that we're going to have a diverse variety of environments within this game and different types of islands and whatnot. And that's basically the main information we have from this, the majority of it that I wanted to highlight here. There's more within Pokeos' compilation of the leak, but those are the main points that I think are worth talking about. I think this game sounds like it's going to be the most ambitious project we've ever seen the Pokemon Company take on. It's something that I'm really looking forward to seeing on Pokemon Day, but the only concern I have about this is I really do hope that on Pokemon Day itself, they actually give us a decent amount of information and not just the logos for the game, because you can look up right now and find the logos for the Japanese Pokemon Wind and Wave titles. That's out there. That's been out there for some time. It appeared on 4chan one day. We need to see more than that because we know a good amount about this game as it is already. And I just feel like if in typical Pokemon fashion, they just show us the logos, maybe show us, just the map for a second. They don't even do that typically. Usually it's just the logos and a cinematic trailer announcing the game. We don't even get gameplay. I think this time around they need to do more than that, especially given that this time around, graphically speaking, it seems like the franchise is going to take a big leap forward. So I think they need to show that, especially given the criticisms we've seen with the Pokemon franchise recently. Graphically speaking, they've been really getting hit hard with that, and I'm not going to say some of it isn't a bit deservingly so, although I think that the complaints about Pokemon Legends ZA are a bit unwarranted because that game looks fine to me. I know that it has flat textures on the building, but apparently the reason for that is because the game was chugging on the Switch 1 with the 3D model balconies, which you could argue make that a Switch 2 exclusive, have the 3D models in the Switch 2 version. They didn't do that, but I'm not going to kill them for that. I think it's okay. I like the game, how it looks visually speaking. I think it's the best looking Pokemon game we've had on Switch outside of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. So I think they need to show more. I want to see the starters. I want to see the region itself, the map. I want to see maybe a few new Pokemon, the legendaries, right? I think the legendaries and the starters at a bare minimum need to be shown, along with the map, title of the game, and a little bit of some gameplay and just visuals of what we can expect from this game. But yeah, that's pretty much all we know right now, or the most important information, I should say, in regards to Pokemon Wind and Wave. It's going to be exciting, man. Pokemon Day is coming pretty soon, and we should get our first look at Pokemon Wind and Wave, which are going to come out later this year in 2026, probably in November, I would say, given that's the typical release schedule we see for Pokemon titles outside of Legends ZA, which I think that was moved just because the DLC was coming out, 2 months later. They didn't want to put them too close together. Anyways, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think about all this. What do you guys think about the leaks that we have for Pokemon Wind and Wave Generation 10? It's kind of crazy because this is the most information we've ever had going into a Pokemon Day regarding a new title that hasn't been announced yet, especially a new generation. This usually doesn't happen. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this from Trainer DC. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.